This is Sarah Tebow, and I am the host of the Side Woo podcast. Join me for conversations about mental health and metaphysical issues from the lens of living a more creative, fulfilling, and connected life. From the physical to the metaphysical and beyond, welcome to the Side Woo. Scott, do you want to kind of be our MC honorary?
Hi, my name is Scott Ogden. I have Shrine Gallery, and we work with Hayley Barker in New York. And I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out. Thank Art Book for having us in Hauser and Wirth. And this book we released not too long ago, so it's really nice to have a formal event with a cool shop. And it was a real labor of love. I didn't want to stop working on it, but I think it came out really quite beautifully, and the works look almost as accurate as they could. And I don't know, it's just a really great celebration. Hayley and I have been working together almost 4.5, 5 years. So it just feels special to be with all of y'all and to have this conversation of Sarah Tebow and Hayley Barker. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you guys, everybody, and thank you so much, Scott and Lacey and Hayley. I'm so honored that you trusted me with this.
It's my pleasure.
Yay!
Yeah.
Quick introduction to the Side Woo for those that aren't familiar. It's my podcast that I started in 2021, and it is a conversational podcast with artists and creators that I created to have conversations that I wasn't seeing within the art world, kind of about metaphysical issues and mental health topics like addiction recovery, woo-woo stuff, hence the Side Woo, queer coming out stories. And it's been really transformative for my life to have these conversations. And so with this, it's my intention to create a space for these types of conversations to happen while at the same time unpacking art in the way that you might see in a commercial gallery or in a museum setting. So normalizing it and making it more accessible for people. But thank you so much for coming. Yay.
Yay, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, maybe to kick it off, I already know the answer, but we always ask, what sign are you for the first question?
I'm Sagittarius. I don't know my exact birth time, though, so, yeah. The rest of it is a mystery. I know my moon is in Aquarius.
Oh, cool.
And I think my rising is Scorpio, but I can't tell you for sure. Yeah.
And do you feel relieved that you don't know? Because I was looking at my chart this morning and seeing what are the transits doing and what should I know about my life right now? And that's a lot to have to worry about.
Oh my God, yeah. We have kind of a doozy of a week coming up, but
do tell.
Well, oh God, I don't even know. I don't know if I want to bring that energy here, but let me tell you, it's kind of a week and then a month. But it's going to be good. We're going to get through it. It's transformative, and that's always something to work with.
Yeah, I mean, the Capricorn moon, full moon, I think really kicked things off. For those who don't know, that's the day that Biden announced he was stepping down. So it was kind of if you don't believe in astrology, that's a good case study for you to unpack.
Definitely. I mean, I don't know all of the details of my planets and such, but I still do the Chani app because I love it.
You do?
I do.
Yeah.
I guessed my birth time so I can kind of at least play along with it, and then when I don't like it, I can say, "Oh, that's not accurate."
Right.
So
that one's not me. That must be wrong.
Yeah, but astrologers refuse to give me a chart because they're we just don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of Googling, what does it mean if I don't know my birth chart? There's some other meaning behind that.
Yeah.
You're forever in the present moment, or that's your invitation.
That. I like that. Yeah. I'll take that.
Yeah, why not? But speaking of witchy woo-woo stuff, the book is called Altar, and you are a practicing witch. I was wondering if you could kind of unpack your choice of the title and then also say a little bit what being a witch means to you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways to be a witch, and I find that some of the simplest ways are the ways that work for me. I've had enough issues with old esoteric traditions to kind of be skeptical of the sexism, racism, patriarchal bullshit that you find. Oh, can we swear? Sorry.
Yeah,
about
how about
it? That we find in a lot of the older traditions that are witchy and, say, European traditions.
Like Italian. Or,
yeah. I don't
I'm
need
Italian,
it.
But
I just don't need it. So I tend to learn from queer, feminist, earth-based, intersectional, contemporary witches, and those are really the people I believe in and love and learn from. My own background, I've been in a coven before, and I've been a soul practitioner now for a while. That's kind of like where I find my peace these days. And the title altar refers to something that I learned about in my coven. It was kind of an old witchy chant from like the 70s feminist women's circle consciousness raising groups that is something about the earth being the first altar. And the first blood was the blood of the menstrual blood. So I've always thought about the earth being the altar. And so being a landscape painter, to me, that means you're always like painting the site of a kind of sacred or divine potential, and also a place where you come to perform ritual or to, communicate with a greater spirit.
yeah, and it kind of gives you this sense of scale. If you think about the average altar, for those who maybe aren't practicing witch in the audience or listening, you have a table or you have a windowsill, and then you place objects on it that are usually like miniatures. But then if you enlarge that to the entire earth, and then we're the little objects being put on it, it kind of is humbling and makes you recontextualize like what you're actually doing here.
Exactly. I love that. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've always made little altars in my spaces. As a child growing up, I had them on all of my shelves, things that I found like rocks and sometimes even bugs and, dolls and souvenirs from places. Soils. I love collecting soils and plant samples and all of the little things that you find in nature that seem to be special.
Yeah. Do you get into candle magic at all?
Somewhat, yeah. I do some candle magic.
Oh, that's cool. I feel like with Sag energy, Sag is fire, yeah.
I love burning things.
Yeah. Well, and your show in this book, I'm just putting together, is all about land that you remember that had burned down during a fire.
Part of it, yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Okay, maybe we can, because that was the second half of my question. How does this show up? Other than kind of your first explanation, how does it continue to show up and inform maybe colors or, which locations you choose to paint?
Well, in terms of color, I think of it in terms of the wheel of the seasons, the wheel of the year, and how that's a lot of earth-based contemporary witches use that idea to think about how everything in life is part of a cycle of life and death. And so thinking about the seasons, the colors, I think, can be reflected in that way, like thinking about the blue of a sky in summer versus the dark gray of, say, a winter day. Even though LA, that doesn't exactly happen very often. But
brown to green.
Brown to green. Or pink.
Yeah, right.
But the seasons play a role in the color, the quality of light, the emotional tenor of a space during different seasons, the way it changes. All those things, plus the fact that I have I always forget how to say it, colors and feelings and music all come together for me. What is that word?
Synesthesia.
Yeah, that's it, synesthesia. I have that too, so I think that definitely plays a role. Then in terms of choosing the spaces, I only like to paint things that I know well and have a relationship with. So it's not like I could go on vacation and see something pretty and then want to paint it necessarily. It's more about, although that has happened a couple times, but it's more about the everyday and say my garden or a nature or a neighbor's garden or a park or a space that I feel like has some relationship with the humans and the humans have a relationship with it.
Yeah, and that's something that I kind of look forward to in my own work, this idea of what is the energy behind the thing that you're looking at, if there isn't that connection, and like you kind of build up this like energetic ecosystem with your environment. And I don't know if, because I think a lot of this work was started during the pandemic. I remember going on all these walks and like noticing trees in a new way, because you'd go every day. I was actually like in Mexico, and oh, these trees are so cool, and then every day I'd be like, same trees, and but you're like, oh, there's like a slight difference, maybe this part has grown more, or just kind of these subtle shifts, and you become more energetically entangled in a way.
Absolutely, that's beautifully said. Yeah. And even I think all of the different variations on revisiting a space, I think, you know, seasons, temperature, light, changing physical conditions, your mood or your body and how it feels, or your emotional, psychological, spiritual state of mind. I think all these things kind of play a role, and it's part of that energetic sort of cycle that I think of with painting. Like it comes through you, it goes to the painting, and hopefully it is a cycle that continues.
Yeah, it's like this analog too to the idea of like magic, or, you know, miracles happening. I think like the creative process is so connected to that. And do you ever feel like where are you getting your ideas, do you think? Because that's something I always wonder, who's giving me this idea? Is it like the spirit of Monet, or, you know, like that's what you'd want, but, you know, like where are ideas coming from versus like where is like divine messaging come from in other areas, you know?
I don't think there's a difference. Yeah, I mean, I think anything that if you're trying to be very present in a space, I think any single thing can sort of come alive and speak to you and give you energy or feelings or messages. So it's kind of, to me, that's all divine. That's all like the goddess is how I call her. Yeah.
Are there any examples of like when you had one of those moments where you felt like, oh wow, this was not expected?
Yeah, I actually just had one. I like to make mood boards for each season and kind of come up with a theme for the year. And this year my theme was, and it's something I like meditate upon and then sort of like wait to see if it sinks in and kind of wants to be the theme. It was a snake shedding her skin. And about a month ago, Tim and I, my husband, were on a little hike at the park near our house, and we were walking up this little hill, and there was this beautiful, gigantic, like rattlesnake skin on the path. And I thought, oh yes.
Yeah, you can't get more literal than that.
Here you are. And I took it and put it on the altar in my studio, and of course I have to paint it now. That's just kind of the way things work, I think. So, you know, it's right next to another tree that I recently saw, a desert poplar, that's like kind of up the path. And that so I'm also going to be painting.
Like skin showed up after you had kind of thought that was your symbol. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that stuff kind of happens all the time.
Yeah.
Once you start kind of just incorporating it into the everyday.
Yeah, if you're receptive and watching for it. Who are some painters that you feel like, I mean, I know Charles Birchfield you said, but I feel like thinking about, and also thinking about the idea of synesthesia, like taking one sensory input and putting it out in another form, usually like color or sound.
Yeah.
So what are you taking in to create like what we see in the book and in your paintings?
Well, let's see. In terms of other artists, I've been thinking a lot about Michael Armitage. I don't know if any of you know him, but he's an incredible painter.
Does he make ship paintings? Or who am I thinking? I think I'm thinking Armistead. Well,
that might be somebody else. Yeah, I'm not sure. A lot of them are figurative and have nature in them, and he paints on this like tree kind of bark that he is native to his village. And they're beautiful. They have so much energy, and there's something about the rhythm of the way the marks work on the texture that to me is like super rich and powerful and conveys that like spirit that's alive in everything.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, he's amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And thinking about one of the things that we talked about was this, and connected to your synesthesia, being like a highly sensitive person. Is that like partly why you started painting, or like how has that played out in your life? I feel like HSPs are like a new like label for something that many of us have struggled with / had a experience of without really being able to understand like why we were hypersensitive. Or
oh my gosh, yes. I mean, I think I've always been highly sensitive, and it's just a matter of finding literature to read about it that helps me understand what that means and how it's not like necessarily a burden, but something that can be incorporated into how you care for yourself.
And how does it show up for you? Because I feel like what I've heard, it's linked to autism.
That's possible.
I'm not a doctor or anybody that don't take that for granted.
It's highly possible. I'm not sure for myself, and I haven't had any medical, diagnoses, but for me, it's always like a stimulus overload is kind of what happens. It can be in places where there's too many people, too much noise, too much brightness. I'm just like very sensitive to light and color and sound. So if you ever come visit me in the studio when I'm painting, I'm like the meanest DJ. Like I'm on it because I love music and I listen to music when I paint, and I like to sing while I paint. But it has to be just right. It has to be the right song. It has to be the right sound. And if it goes against it, I am really physically uncomfortable. That's an example.
Do you listen to a lot of the same thing over and over?
I do. Yeah.
I do too because of that. Because if it's the wrong thing, I get thrown out, and then I'm like, oh, I can't focus. Yeah. Or I listen to podcasts that I know will have a good energy that won't take away from what I'm doing. I don't know. Do you listen to talking at all?
No.
No. Okay. No.
No.
How dare you?
No, it's too. It just puts me in a different place in my mind. I mean, I think it's just the other side of the brain, and I guess that side of the brain doesn't want to be a part of painting. So I mean, it's part of what I think of as getting dumber. I get a little dumb when I paint, and I think I have to because I just have to be an animal a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of like this idea of engaging with the body instead of the mind, and how before painting you were in performance. Yeah. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your journey into art, and then, why painting? Sure. Like in grad school, why painting?
Why painting? I know, Gosh, it's such a long story. Let me make it not long. When I was in undergrad, it was the early 90s, and painting was kind of poo-pooed upon in a lot of undergrad programs as well. It seemed, postmodernism was the thing and painting was dead.
Yeah, I feel like that question was like, so why is this a painting? And you're like, oh, stop. Yeah. I didn't pay this much for you to ask me that. No,
yeah, I mean, it's true. I got into undergrad and just was discouraged from making paintings. So I also was dealing with a lot of personal issues that required, I think, a different medium to convey them. So I found performance through really seeing artists like Karen Finley, or discovering the work of Ana Mendieta through a professor. Those two artists really helped me to kind of want to do performance, and it seemed like a way to solve a problem. If you're chewing on a creative idea and you don't know how to solve it, sometimes you just need a different tool. And for me, performance was that tool, and I had to kind of almost do an exorcism of myself to get to the place where I could make paintings and free myself from a lot of the traumatic things I was dealing with from my early adulthood.
Well, I feel like Karen Finley is specifically because of the absurd approach, and I'm just thinking of the peach, the canned peaches. If you guys know that performance, I won't go into too much detail, but I remember seeing that, and
what is it? Tell
well, she was stuffing canned peaches up her butt and kind of facing the audience, but putting her head under her legs and reciting poetry. It was really out there, and I remember thinking, this is changing everything I know about what women are allowed to do. Yeah. And I think that was really important at that point because I had just come from the Midwest, and I didn't end up doing that much performance, but it did have a little bit of a moment where I was like, oh, I can be a different way or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very freeing and embodying in a way that painting wasn't yet for me. But having been a painter now for a long time, now painting is that same thing for me. It's performative, it's super physical, it's exhausting in a similar way. It takes, every single thing I have, and so did performance.
Yeah, painting is really physically demanding if you start working big, especially, and like you kind of have to be in good shape. I feel like you have to work out in some ways, maybe not all your muscles, but I always feel like, oh, I'm sweating.
Oh yeah, it's
really hard work.
It's really hard work day after day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Do you have a good studio couch and napping?
Oh yes,
setup? Yeah.
I have a bed. Yeah, I take naps every day. That's part of my strategy. Around 1:30 after lunch, I nap for about an hour.
So Prince used to have a bed set up. If he would go on tour or he'd go to different recording studios, he'd make sure they had a bed because he wouldn't get enough sleep.
Another
and I was
reason
like,
to love Prince.
I was like, that's
amazing.
So smart.
That's beautiful.
I didn't even know we were allowed to ask for that. So now you know.
Now you know, yeah. I mean,
it's not just a couch. You actually get a bed if you want one.
Yeah, we have a whole we call it
juice.
the adult daycare in my studio. There's a big fluffy rug and foam rollers and all the things you need to work out all the kinks.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, we need foam rollers in our studio.
Amen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, thinking about, I feel, creating this self-care corner in your studio is definitely one way of protecting your energy, but your career has really taken off, I would say, from the outside looking in, over the last couple of years, and the amount of demand on your time, and I assume the number of people looking at your work and just all the things that come with success, that must, I don't know, what was that journey like for you, and how are you staying centered as you have these new demands?
Wow, yeah. Good question. Well, I mean, I feel very grateful and privileged to be able to have the life I have today. To be able to make art full time has been my lifelong dream. And it's something I've worked for my whole life. And at 50 years old, it's really magical to be able to do it. And
did you think that you were going to be able to when you first started? Were you this is happening, I just don't know when it's going to happen?
Yeah.
You were like that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of felt like that was the only thing I could do. To be frank, not good at many jobs,
Have you gotten fired from jobs before?
No, but
That's
I've quit a million jobs.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done just about every kind of job. So yeah, I mean, the shift in my career has been big and sometimes very overwhelming, but also it's been an opportunity to learn how to really protect my creative path, my journey, my space. My studio is very sacred to me. I think of it as it's a place outside of the world. It's my cave, and I protect it with my life. It is my place where the magic has to happen. And so everything in my life is centered around moving towards that special place so that I can receive the creativity I need to make the paintings I need to make.
And could you give an example of needing to push back, or what are some of the things that have come up that you felt no,
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot.
Oh, okay.
But it's good. As a people pleaser, it's been a good opportunity for me to grow into advocating for my own needs and really being selective about where my art is and how it exists in the world, as much as that's possible within a late capitalist society. Yeah, I mean, it's a blessing to make a living off of paintings. And it's hard sometimes to say no to things that a year ago I would have done. That's really hard and weird.
And do you have a process of sussing it out where something comes up and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right, but on paper it looks really good? I feel like that happens to everyone.
Sure.
Do you sit on it? Do you meditate? What do you do to kind of get there where you're as sure as you can be that you're going to make the right decision about it?
Well, One of my therapists used to say nothing's on fire. So I try to remember that one when I have something to like figure out. Nothing's on fire. So I try to sit on it. And a lot of it really has to do with the people involved. I like to work with people who have integrity, who are honest and straightforward, transparent, kind, have, care for me as a human being and not just someone who wants to push my paintings, So it's relationships are very important to me, and I like people who can work together. And I feel very lucky to have a team now that works together. But it's been, some work, but everyone's been so lovely. I'm just very grateful.
Well, I did read in the back of the book, you wrote like a thank you list, and it was like, I love all of you. Like, thanks so much. And I was like, oh my God, exactly what you said. I felt every single person who's been part of the equation of your career, whether they're a gallery or, someone, in your studio, like, you have this deep emotional connection to, which feels very anti-capitalist. Didn't you know that you're supposed to be a cog in like the art market machine, and like feelings are extra?
I'm so not good at being a cog, though. Yeah. It's so easy to not be one for me, because I'm such a slow painter, and I'm kind of a weirdo. So it really, I'm like older. There's all sorts of weird things.
You're so old. Oh
I'm so old. Oh my God. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of like more specifics around this topic for people like who are trying to figure out their own careers, because I think it's easy in hindsight to be like, yeah, it worked out great. But do you feel like there were moments where you said no and it was a bit of a risk at the time, like you maybe lost something technically, but then you were like, no, I know this isn't for me. So you just like, I'm having one of those like right now for myself where I feel like it's not the thing, but like, I trust that something else will come. And so
you have to, because, you don't want to risk your art being handled by something that doesn't feel right with it.
Yeah. For me, it's like the energy, the energy of a situation. If like, I don't know if this happens to you too, where like maybe bad things start happening, like someone gets into a car accident on the way to a studio visit, even though it like has nothing to do with the show or the people. Yeah. It's just, this is starting to feel like a little energetically off.
You just have to trust your intuition.
I feel like there are little signs like that. Not that it's always the sign, but
yeah. I mean, I've certainly had a million moments of being disappointed. I mean, being an artist, trying to get your art into places when you're coming up, oh my God, it's a trail of just like disappointment. And I remember I used to keep this document.
Trail of tears, except for that's not appropriate, but.
It was bad. Like I used to have a document that was everything I applied to and got rejected from. And I remember like it was about 20 pages long, and I stopped doing it because I was like, this is super sad. Like I can't keep doing this. I can't, so I just have to have a lot of faith. Yeah. Because it's all risky, and it's all scary, and it's your art, and it's your livelihood, and it's yourself and your energy, and you give up so much to be an artist. You don't always get to have a lot of normal human experiences. On times when I'm not painting, I'm like, what do people do in their lives? They have
all this free time.
They have,
that they're doing other things.
They do things, It's really interesting.
Sports,
hobbies,
go on boats,
barbecues, all these things. I'm just like, how do people do all these things? It's really interesting. Yeah. Sorry, I'm like far out.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I think this is important to talk about because, like, you sacrifice a lot, like, to have a career where you're a maker, especially if you're making everything, right? Yeah. Maybe do you have any advice to people on, like, setting up a studio or, like, a routine that works for you? I think going to the HSP, I remember reading that you like to work with the lights off.
I do sometimes, yeah. As much as painters like light, I also love painting when it's kind of dark. I know what the colors are and I know what they're going to look like, so it's not like I'm experimenting that wildly. It's just very calming. You know, I like to get in the studio. Sometimes I'll burn some incense, light a candle. I like to get there super early so that I don't have to talk to anybody first, because talking is really exhausting for me. I put on my music. Sometimes I dance. I have my coffee. And then, you know, get things going. I leave things around the studio to remind me where I left them. And, you know, it's easy then to just dip back into it. Yeah.
Do you like Post-it notes, or what kind of things do you leave?
I guess palettes for me.
Oh,
like
okay.
You know, the way I arrange my palettes around my painting area, I have like all the palettes I'm working from on one side and then the one that I'm currently working with on the other. And I just sort of like...
Do you do like warm and cool, or like how are you organizing?
Oh, there's not that much thinking going
no
into
rhyme or
it.
reason.
No, it's more like this tree is this palette, this sky is this palette,
interesting.
this plant is that palette.
Oh, cool. And do you
Yeah.
clean your brushes every day?
No.
Okay, yeah. Mine are like permanently in a jug of water to keep them from drying out, and then I clean them maybe once every 2 weeks.
Oh
3
gosh,
weeks.
I clean them once a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel so much
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Okay.
But I like them a little messed up.
Yeah,
So,
well, you're kind of working, like from what I remember seeing at the night show, there's thin washes. Do you use like any kind of special medium or
Yeah. I have a little special medium and
little recipe?
Little recipe.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then do you do some like dry brushing
Tons.
Tons
yeah.
of dry brushing,
Tons of dry
yeah.
brush. Yep.
on linen?
Yep.
Cool. This is for the painter nerds out there.
Linen sealed with PVA.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
do you do clear gesso or like matte medium?
No.
Just PVA.
Yep.
And that's archival.
Yep.
Oh, cool. I don't know if I knew that. Fun
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah.
everybody.
Lucius Hudson.
Oh, okay. That's the PVA brand, or?
They're the folks that make my stretchers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I'm terrible at preparing surfaces, and I just know that. So
But also, it's a lot of work. Oh my god.
when you're working,
That's like my least favorite part of being a painter.
when you're working
It's the
on a
worst.
large painting, trying to apply PVA so that it's beautiful and
Oh my god.
like a very sheer sort of even surface. I don't have the machines to do it. You know, they use big machines to do it.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's worth every penny. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just do gesso, so it doesn't have to be as exact. But
Yeah.
when it's clear, it's a
Yeah.
different ballgame.
Yeah. And linen is notoriously kind of tricky to stretch. So, yeah.
Thinking about woo stuff again,
Mm.
do you have any like ghost stories or like metaphysical experiences other than that snakeskin showing up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a recent one, my husband and I and some friends and my dealers were in Edinburgh for my show at Ingleby Gallery that's up right now. And Richard Ingleby, who is one of the co-owners of the gallery, took us on a little day trip outside of Edinburgh to a few sites. We saw this garden called Little Sparta that's a beautiful work of art, hard to describe in a short blurb. Nearby was Roslyn Chapel, a really interesting sort of sacred place. And then near that was a place called Witch's Leap. And there were a bunch of big trash bins in front of it. It was
Oh, kind of
very
ruining the vibe.
Well, the vibe was difficult. So it was a very tall rock with a couple of scraggly trees on it. And it was the place where they used to take women and say, jump, and if you fly, you're a witch. Thousands of women died off this rock, and going there, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah, me
but,
too. Ugh. Maybe
it
we
was-
died there in a past
It was
life.
horrible. I haven't had a strong feeling like this in a while that really conjured like a vision of humans, but I closed my eyes after being there for a minute and could just see all of these faces like howling and crying, and it was very blue, and the feeling was so intense I had to go away from it. I couldn't even look at it. And a friend who was there is like, Hayley, are you going to make a painting of it? And I was like, I don't think I can. It's too much of it's like worse than a graveyard, you know, it's a site of murder. Yeah. So that was pretty recently.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's wild. I mean, Scotland is so spicy. Like, the energy there is so wild.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of reminds me of like you being at UI with Anna Mendieta, who went there and who was an inspiration. Yeah, I mean, what do you think? I don't know. I don't know if I have more. I feel like I have a question that wouldn't go into anything we're talking about. I'm just thinking about this resurgence of witchcraft now, and this is honestly during the pandemic. I mean, a little bit before, especially during Trump. Like, I know Jessica Lanyadoo, who's a big astrology podcaster, started around 2016. Yeah. And that was kind of a point in my life when I started like leaning more into like metaphysical things. Yeah. I'd always been into like Eckhart Tolle and everything, but what is this resurgence of witchcraft about? It does feel feminist and queer, and it feels like, I don't know, it feels important, even if it is a little bit commodified and goopified at this point, you know, but
I think it is important. I think the earth just needs us to be witches, because witches love and respect the earth, if I can speak in huge generic terms.
Sure, right.
Working with the elements, working with plant medicine, rock medicine.
Just being in tune with the cycles of nature. And I think back to like anti-capitalism, like being accepting like decay and rebirth as this like natural thing instead of doing all the things we can to fight against it.
And finding that power within yourself to know that you too do have like agency within all of this. I think that's very important. And, you know, accepting people that maybe haven't always been able to claim their power in a kind of public way. I think that's been a really powerful aspect. And I think like without, I think the evolution of the queer movement in contemporary terms, I don't think that witches would be what they are today without that. I think like a lot of books about like nature being queer, or like that book, The Art of Queer Failure, like things like that, I think all kind of brought us to this less hierarchical like relationship with the earth, where we aren't like the lords of it, but we work with it and are of it. You know, there's like a queering of our position within the framework of the cosmos, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it makes me think of Jess Hundley talking about like the cover for her tarot book is by this one artist who everything in her deck is all about the future being like non-binary and gender, you know, like not neutral, but just, and I think that's nature. Like nature doesn't know what gender it is. It just exists and flows and
is wildly creative.
Yeah, it's just constant creation. That's really our natural state. And I feel like, a lot of things have been put in place to cut that off, cut that stream off. And language is maybe one of them, you know, to compartmentalize and contain. Yeah. And that was kind of, there's a book called The Goddess and the Alphabet. I haven't fully gotten through it, but the basic premise is as soon as there was language, the goddess culture went away, and it led to a more male-driven culture, which, to be fair, both cultures at the time were really violent. Like, a lot of sacrifices in the goddess culture, so it wasn't necessarily utopian, but...
No one ever said that witches or matriarchies were nonviolent.
Totally, right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things Sarah Gottesdiener says in her essay is nature is violent and destructive. Totally. And sublime at the same time.
She was... Sarah, hi.
Shout out.
Oh, shout out to Sarah for a beautiful essay.
Cool. Well, thank you for going on that tangent with me.
I hope I made some sense.
Definitely. No, I love what you said.
Thank you.
Well, cool. This is maybe a good time for questions. Speaking of Sarah, I don't know if you had any questions you wanted to kick off Q&A. I can bring the mic to you.
Yeah, I'll start.
Okay.
Hi. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
You spoke a little bit about protecting your creative energy.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could talk about a time that maybe your pilot light went out, or you had like a kind of lull or a valley.
Yeah.
And whether or not there were things you could do to relight it and or protect it, or I'd love to hear your thoughts on peaks and valleys within a creative process, especially because you've been a creative for decades.
Yeah. There have been so many peaks and valleys. I think a lot of times, it's funny, I'm gonna answer this with a little story, but then answer the question. I was in a panel discussion about 10 years ago at what is now the Feminist Center for Creative Work. I was with a few artists, and the question was, how do you maintain a balanced lifestyle as an artist? And I said, you can't. And I've always been troubled by that response that I gave. I don't know if it's true, and I struggle with that all the time. I don't know if my life is balanced. It probably isn't. I spend a lot of time in the dream time, But to back up to the valleys and the hills, I think most recently I was trying to finish a painting, and I was just physically exhausted. Like, I didn't have any energy, and I struggle with that in a kind of chronic way. And sometimes I think the process shows you what you need to do, and what I had to do at that point was to give into it. And I try to listen to pain and discomfort and use it as a way to tell myself how to take care of myself. So I was like, okay, you're tired, so what do? You need to rest as much as you can, sleep, everything else is cut out for now. Like, I was on a deadline. So I was like, okay, you're gonna sleep after work every day. That's it, you're gonna eat and sleep. And then you're gonna get up, maybe you'll water the garden, and then you're gonna work, because you have to. And then you're gonna sleep, and that's it. And that's how I got through that time. And after a while, I had a little more energy. And then when I was done, I didn't do anything for a while. And that's what I mean by giving up things when you're an artist. Like, you kind of don't get to do everything because you're guarding this little pilot light, and sometimes it's so faint, and you just have to wait and trust yourself and nurture yourself and eat good food and be like soft as can be. Lots of time with cats. I'm serious. They charge my batteries, so that's how it works.
Did you have any kind of like energy practices? Do you do meditation or any kind of like energy work on yourself or with others?
Nothing formal, except that I really know that when rest is needed, rest has to happen. That's the biggest one. Swimming can be a transformative, energetic experience for me, and sometimes that really shifts my energy flow. I just try to ground every day and ground several times throughout the day to check in with my energy to see, are you stressed out? Are you listening to too much news? Are you, are you thinking about this one thing and fixing on it or obsessing? Can you turn all that stuff down and just feel your body, feel your feet on the floor, take a breath from your belly, that thing that is so simple.
Yeah.
Look at the sky, look at a tree, touch a plant, drink water. It gets simple. Light a candle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do those things every day to try to stay sane. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I was curious about, I thought it was really interesting the way you talked about being a witch and being in tune with the earth and the seasons, and then how that relates to your color choices and palettes, a little kind of seasonal. And I just wanted to say that I thought that was interesting, but on top of that, I was curious, like, when you say you're working with like seasons with your colors, are you thinking about that in each painting, or just kind of like overall, like it's kind of seeding in between different paintings and stuff?
Yeah, each painting I think has a specific feel, and the works are pretty autobiographical these days. So it's what season is it? It's late summer. I'm making late summer paintings, pretty much. I think about the time of day associated with each season. So winter, I might be doing more evening paintings. It's really pretty straightforward for me. Yeah, I just do what it shows me. Do what nature's showing me. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Scott.
It's not so much a question. I just got unexpectedly nervous introducing you all, but I failed to highlight Hayley curated a show with us here in Los Angeles that is based around different type of artists than we're talking about in terms of being in art marketplace, but they all work in the same vein. But it's about 14 self-taught artists. It's on view at Shrine, and it's just a very unique artist that Hayley and I think bonded on before we even were talking about her work in the gallery. So if you're able to see it, I don't know, Hayley brought a lot of new ways of talking about and thinking about this material I've been obsessed with since the early 90s. So I don't know, it's a very special show, and I got nervous and did not mention it. So if you can make it, come see it. It's up for 6 weeks.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, and I also just want to say y'all are so, I don't know, the ease of the conversation is really beautiful.
Thank you.
Very nice to hear it all.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I do hope you get to see that show. I think it's really special, and I'm just utterly in love with every artist in the show. I think they're all magical beings. Yeah.
Too many to mention, but they're all looking at art beyond art making. They have sort of superseding intentions, whether it's healing or communing with nature, which we're talking about through your work.
Mediumship.
Yeah, even extraterrestrial connections.
Yeah.
So thank you for being together with us.
Thank you for your help. Yeah, you made it happen.
Does anyone else have a question? I can pass the mic.
Hello.
Hello.
From your talk, it sounds like you're very connected with nature, obviously, and with the resurgence of nature landscape painting in the last, let's say 5 to 8, 10 years. I'm wondering if it sounds like you spend a lot of time in nature. A lot of your paintings are based off things that are very close to you, whether it be your garden or maybe hikes that you've gone on. I'm curious whether it be conceptually or visually, do you think about the ecological change that's happening and how that impacts, again, repeating myself, visually and conceptually, your work?
Oh, yeah. I think about it every day, all day. I try not to, but I think of all the things going on in the world that crushes me, and I know I'm not the only one. Yeah, I feel like my paintings are like prayers in a way. Just please protect this beautiful world we have, just please let these things live and let us all live together for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna start crying, but it's, I think about it all the time. I think that mourning is a big part of my paintings as well. I think there's a lot of sadness in them. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How much does the moon factor in? I know you talked about seasons and stuff, but there's such specificity in the shape and the waxing and the waning in terms of how we're feeling in our bodies, how the environment is responding. And do you sort of specifically create that moon, for example, on your cover as an expression of something you were feeling at the time?
Yeah, I think about the moon all the time. And in fact, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener here wrote a beautiful book about the moon called The Moon Book. That's a beautiful guide to getting to know the cycles and using them in your practice. Usually with paintings, I will paint the moon that is happening during the making of the painting. So whatever phase the moon is in, that's the moon that gets in the painting. I like to give up a lot of my decisions. Just say, you tell me. That's easier for me, and it just feels more honest. Yeah.
Great. Well, I love that as an answer. Just give it up to nature to decide.
Always. Yes, I'm not in control.
Totally. I think none of us really are.
No.
Well, thank you guys so much. It was so wonderful to have you all here. Thank you, Hayley and Scott.
Thank you all for being here.
Lacey.
I really appreciate it.
This was amazing. Thank you. High five. Yay. That's all for this week's episode. Thanks for side wooing with us. We release episodes every other week on Thursday. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate, follow, subscribe, and review our podcast for good karma points. Until we meet again in the side woo.